This video will show you how to replace your front CV axle assembly on the Subaru Outback. This will be located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. We'll remove all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts. If you have a locking lug nut, you're going to want to make sure you have that key. Since mine does have the locking lug nuts, I'm going to be using that first. We'll just turn this until it feels like it wants to seat. Once it does, go ahead and turn that counterclockwise to remove it. We'll be using a 34mm to remove our axle nut. We'll use a hammer and punch directly in the center of the axle to break it free from our wheel bearing. Once you do have movement from that, we can continue on. Now, as far as this tie rod and nut is concerned, typically you're going to find that it's a castle nut and it has a cotter pin holding it in place. You're going to need to remove that cotter pin before you can remove the mounting nut. I'm just going to use some cutters. Let's get this out of here. You can see an ear of that right up along the top on my application. This can be pretty much anywhere. It really depends on where somebody set it. Now my cotter pin is rusted in place. This is extremely common. If that is the case, we're just going to cut the cotter pin and then we'll continue on with that mounting nut. We'll use our 19mm for that mounting nut. Once you have that off of there, just a quick inspection, and we're going to start it back on a couple threads. Now continuing on, we need to separate the outer tie rod end from our steering knuckle. To do this, we're going to cause vibration, and that should break this free. Once it does, it's going to drop down, and that mounting nut will prevent it from falling down and potentially hurting us. We'll hold that outer tie rod end, remove that mounting nut, separate the tie rod from the knuckle. Now, if your cotter pin was lodged in there, you're going to want to remove it. You can do that using a drill bit or even a small hammer and a punch. I'm replacing this outer tie rod end, so I don't have to worry about that. Along the front area of your steering knuckle and your front strut, we can see our ABS wheel speed sensor wiring harness. We need to dislodge this. It has 4 locking tabs, one on the top, bottom, and on each side. This metal tab right here could be facing out towards you, or it might even be bent down. It really depends on the situation here. Ours is bent out, so I'm not too worried about it. You can use pliers moving around as necessary. Now, since this has 4 locking tabs, it's going to be fairly difficult squeezing all of those in at the same time, but if you have a 10mm socket, we should be able to slide this over this entire area. I'm going to press it as far up against that strut as possible. That's going to squeeze in on the ears for me. And now I'll just take hold of this, I'm going to give it a wiggle, and we'll attempt to remove it from the front strut. There we are. Now I always like to have plenty of slack from my ABS wheel speed sensor wire, so I'm just making my way up towards the body of the vehicle now. We're going to carefully pry this out of place. I'm using a trim tool, but you can use pretty much anything as a small prying device. Now that we've fully dislodged our ABS wire along the front of the strut, we're making our way along the rear. This is where we can see our brake flex hose. Use a 12mm to remove the mounting bolt. Now we're continuing on to the 2 mounting bolts that are holding our front strut and steering knuckle together. Along the forward side, we have 2 19mm mounting nuts attached to our 19mm headed mounting bolts, which come through from the backside towards the front. We can see the threaded portion of the bolt. I'm going to hold the bolt head with a 19mm wrench, and we'll be using a socket for the mounting nuts. Just a quick note, during the removal process, you're going to find that the upper camber bolt or adjustment bolt will have a washer. The lower mounting bolt does not. Now I'm going to leave this bolt in here temporarily. I'll start my mounting nut on and we'll continue on to the next mounting bolt. For that one, we can fully remove it. We'll lightly tap this out of place. If you need to, you could use a hammer and punch. Whatever's easiest for you. Now we can get that off of there. Now that we have that bolt out of there, we're taking hold of this. We're going to gently start bringing it down and also pull the axle out and away from our steering knuckle. Just go ahead and slide it right out of there. It's a tight fit. Should be able to get it. All right, so now we're going to leave this hanging. We have no pressure on our ABS wire or flex hose. Let's follow the axle all the way inboard towards the transmission. As you follow the axle in towards the transmission, we're going to use a pry bar from underneath the vehicle. Now for this, I want to put the pry bar up against the inboard side of the axle. I'm going to continue on by pressing up against the transmission. Obviously, we don't want to cause any damage. We're just gently prying the axle out. Once it does break free, we'll make our way back to the wheel well to finish our removal. Now I'm going to reach deep inside this area. We're going to take hold of the inboard side of the axle and the outside of the axle, and we'll start sliding it out of position, removing it from the vehicle. Once you have the axle out of there, prior to installation of the brand new axle, clean and inspect your axle seal. When cleaning this, you only want to use a clean rag. We are not using any type of detergents, which can cause an issue. Just make sure it's soft and pliable, not torn, worn, or damaged in any way. Let's continue on with our installation. We're taking the brand new axle. We're going to carefully start sliding it into place, lining it up with our axle seal, and sliding it in all the way. You may have to lightly tap on the very end of the axle, driving it into the proper position. Now, as you can see, I have this aligned. I'm going to take the axle and attempt to force it inboard towards that transmission. We're listening for an audible click, and then we'll grab onto the inboard side of the CV joint, not the boot. Try tugging it out of position. It should not slide out. Now here's where we're going to take the outer end of the axle. We'll carefully start sliding it into the inboard side of the wheel bearing. Once we have that aligned, we can take the knuckle, start bringing that up towards the front strut. As that happens, the front of the axle is going to go through the wheel bearing. We'll start our strut to knuckle mounting bolts in next. Just go ahead and twist this to get it aligned. Now, prior to installation of our camber bolt, which is the one that has the oblong shank, and our other bolt, we want to apply some anti-seize to the smooth surfaces. We're not applying it to the threaded portion. This will just help ensure that these bolts do not lock up or get stuck inside of that steering knuckle. Now our top mounting hardware has the washer. This is the adjustment bolt. We'll start on both of the mounting nuts. Now we have both of these started on. We're going to go ahead and snug them up and torque each of them to 114 foot-pounds. We'll be holding the bolt head with our 19mm and tightening our 19mm mounting nuts. As I mentioned, the upper hardware is the adjustment hardware. This will be the part that the alignment professional will be making your adjustment with. Start securing our ABS wire. Go ahead and press that into the front strut. Go ahead and press that in. Along the other side of the front strut, go ahead and resecure your brake flex hose. 12mm bolt. Now we can start installing the outer tie rod end into the steering knuckle. As we bring this up, we're going to want to make sure we install our mounting nut along the top. Now, since I'm replacing my outer tie rod end, my mounting nut actually has a neoprene locker in there. This isn't a castle nut like we originally had. If you're using your original outer tie rod end, you want to make sure you tighten and torque it properly. Once it's torqued, we need to make sure that we have the port on the tie rod end aligned with the slots on the castle nut. If it's not lined up, continue tightening till the very next slot is, and then install your cotter pin. Get this tie rod end in place. We're bringing it up to the steering knuckle. Now we'll continue on with our mounting nut. I have a neoprene locking nut, so I do not have a cotter pin that I need to contend with. We're going to snug this up and torque it to 20 foot-pounds. If you find when you attempt to tighten the tie rod end nut, it wants to spin on you, go ahead and carefully use a pry bar underneath your outer tie rod end. We're prying up against our lower control arm, applying upward pressure. Snug that nut. Now we can install our axle nut. When installing the axle nut, you never want to use an impact tool. If you over-tighten this, you will cause damage to your bearing and possibly the axle. For this, you just want to use a hand ratchet or hand tool of some sort, and we'll go ahead and snug it up. Once you do have it snug, we'll get this closer to the ground so we can torque it to the proper torque specification. Now we have this in an area that we can start torquing it. To torque this, you can either have a second person inside of the vehicle pressing on the brake pedal, or you can have a pry bar like I have here. We're going to go diagonally across these studs all the way down to the ground. That's going to prevent this from turning on us while we continue on torquing this to 162 foot-pounds. Once you do have that torqued, go ahead and remove the bar. Now we're going to pay attention to our axle nut and the axle itself. Look at the axle. You can see that there's a rectangular slot. We're going to be using a hammer and punch to try to drive part of this nut down into that groove. That will prevent this from loosening up on us while we're driving down the road. Once you're confident that it's locked down, we'll continue on with our wheel. One last inspection in this area and we can reinstall our wheel. Once you have that in place, you're going to continue on with all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts. If you do have a locking lug nut, you want to use that as well. We'll start them on, snug them up. Get the wheel back on the ground, and the torque for each of these will be 90 foot-pounds. Now we have the wheel back on the ground, so we're going to torque these to that 90 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. The next thing you need to do is hop in the passenger compartment, pump up the brake pedal till it's nice and firm, take your vehicle for a road test down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.